Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
Revolution Radio.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. And with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other world. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Hello and welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. It's always a great honor and pleasure to be here with you in discourse and dialogue as we share fellowship on all things esoteric, examining the illusion parading as reality and trying to make sense of it all and understand how prophecy aligns with the coming rise of the Antichrist and New World Order. But this evening, we're going to be speaking to my good friend Kimberly Baker, who is a liaison for us in donating and helping to support the Kenyan orphanage where we work with Robert. And we did a show not long ago, I guess maybe a month or so. And in that show, we talked about how one can free oneself even from the matrix of maritime law here in the United States. And because I know a lot of you are intrigued by this concept and wanting to learn more, we have invited Kimberly back. And tonight is the night. And so, Kimberly, are you there?
I am here, Zen. It's so good to hear your voice and talk to you tonight.
Yeah, thanks for your willingness to come on and to join us and to school us in some of the stuff that you've been looking into and learning about, because this is certainly, even for a lot of people that are alternative truth seekers and that have been on the path of awakening for a very long time, this is still new subject matter. And so, if you would, before we move on, just provide your information, any social media, any contact email address that you'd like to share. We'll touch base on the orphanage real quick, and then we'll move into it.
Okay. My email address, if you need to get a hold of me, is bakerkimberly@outlook.com. bakerkimberly@outlook.com. And I'm going to give other, I guess I could give the Sovereignty International.
Whatever
FYI.
you need.
SovereigntyInternational.FYI is a great website for researching this type of thing. The other one is TASA, TASA. TASA means the American State Assemblies. That's what TASA means, but it's tasa.americanstatenationals.org. That's for getting yourself and bringing yourself back into sovereignty and getting into the land jurisdiction. And that's where we are set up for every state. That's for all 50 states, and it's tassa.americanstatenationals.org. The YouTube channel is State Nationals United YouTube. Sovereign Living is another YouTube channel. So there's just some information on where to find some of this information at.
Awesome. And I am trying to. The first one was sovereignty. What?
sovereigntyinternational.fyi.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna try to look at some of this while we're going through. But just wanted to ask you how things were going with Robert, and with all the lockdowns and everything, how the situation was there.
They had been doing okay. I got a message from him earlier today saying that they have been ill. The message I got from him today is that some of them have been ill with running fever and not feeling well. And so I don't know if it's COVID. I just know that some of them have had flu-like symptoms there at the orphanage. And so I haven't heard back from how everybody's doing, but that was my last message today, is that they're doing okay, but that some of them aren't feeling very well.
Okay, well, we'll definitely pray for them and hope nothing, crazy comes over the group and, Pastor Robert and his wife. But let's also, definitely don't want, them to have to contend with any kind of insanity or, but in regard to this topic, and for people that don't know what we're talking about and may have never heard about it before, if you'll kind of give a general description of how you got into it, and also why it's relevant for study.
Okay. I was trying to figure out, there's so much information of how I wanted to coin all of this, because you could really go 100 different ways. How I actually got into it is I was dealing with a court matter with debt from my previous marriage, and there was debt that was there, and so they were actually coming after me for credit card debt through credit cards that I had with my ex-husband. And so I actually was looking into it and looking through court things when I found that I just happened to run across stuff on a straw man and saying that that debt is, I ran across it. It's the strangest thing of that debt is not real. Because we have a fiat currency and debt is not real, that we shouldn't be in debt, I guess is the best way to describe it. So as I was looking into that, I found that the jurisdiction of the court system that we have here in the United States is actually what's called a maritime law. There's different jurisdictions. If you look at the word law, it's LAW. There's 3 types of jurisdictions that you have here in the world. And there's land jurisdiction, there's air jurisdiction, and then there's water jurisdiction, which we call maritime jurisdiction. And what happened to us is that when we are born, around the time of the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt, around 1933, what he did is he actually confiscated all of the gold from the people during that time. And when he did that, he had signed an executive order, and what you had to do back then was turn all of your gold in. So it became like illegal to have gold. You had to turn all of your gold into the federal government. And so when they did that, they went straight fiat, which means you would use promissory notes, which that's all a dollar bill is it's a promissory note. It's a promise to pay. And so in 1933, that's when he did that. But around that same time, during the Depression, all of that, they came up with what's called a birth certificate. And this is where we became enslaved into this New World Order system, I guess you'd say. Before, with our Constitution, the Constitution that we have has us classified as we the people. And people are man and woman, living human beings. But we didn't become citizens of this country until we had what's called the birth certificate. And so what that birth certificate does is it's actually very sneaky how the government, corporations, or whatever you want to call them, the system came in and classified us as almost like animals. I know that sounds crazy, but we get the word sheep, hey, you're dumb as sheep, or, where they call us the sheeple or chattel. Mm-hmm. That actually is a true statement because of the birth certificate. Let's just say when my mom went to have me in the hospital, the doctors, the medical system, they come in and they give you what's called a birth certificate application. And so you fill out that application thinking, oh yeah, it's just something that you have to do. And it fills out your mom's name and your dad's name and your name. But when you actually get that birth certificate back after you do the application, it's sent back to you. And when you have it, any of you guys that are listening can go get your birth certificate. And if you look at it, it has your name in uppercase and lowercase letters. For me, it'd be Kimberly Baker, with uppercase and lowercase. But then what they actually do is the state creates a straw man for you. It's a straw man is like an entity. It's actually a dead entity. It actually turns you as the living person, the living people, or the living man or woman, which is a child. It turns you into a corporation. And the reason it turns you into a corporation is when you look at your birth certificate, you'll have your name in all caps. Because to signify a corporation, that would be in all capital letters. And on your birth certificate, you basically become lost at sea. When you're born, you become a vessel that's lost at sea, and they take you from land jurisdiction into what's called water jurisdiction. And you are now a vessel, which is a corporation. And pretty much anything you do for the rest of your life is going to be done through that straw man. And the way it's sneaky is you can operate no business whatsoever except through that straw man name. And the best way I know to explain it is if you go look at your driver's license, if you look at your birth certificate, if you go get your water bill or your electric bill or your mortgage statement or anything that has to do with you as in commerce, anything that has to do with you in commerce is going to be in all caps. And so they've basically taken you as a living, breathing soul and turned you into a straw man. That's where I learned that they can just drag you into the court system for anything that they want to drag you into the court system for. Where I was having to go to court over something that really didn't apply to me. And so it was, and even on my court stuff, it was all uppercase. So this third party entity was suing me when I didn't have a contract with them it wasn't even the credit card company that was suing me. It was a third-party entity that was suing me. So I didn't even have a contract with them. And that's basically how I found out about all of it. But when that straw man is put in your name, you are basically bound to that, and it makes us slaves. That is how they enslaved the American people to their debt system. And it actually started way back. It started in 1812 is actually when it started, when we had the Revolutionary War. It says that we won the war as colonists, but we actually didn't win that war. King George III basically, that war was financed on both sides, from King George and the Bank of England. They actually financed both sides. When we came out of that war here in America, all of our debt was actually to England. And so the debt, we were basically indebted to who we fought with. And so we became their slaves at that point. And so all wars that you see, from World War I, World War II, any war all of the wars that we have had has been for the bankers and for the commerce industry. And since that's the case, the people who make the money is the commerce, the bankers, anybody that's in the corporations. You can go back and look at World War II. Coca-Cola and a bunch of these big corporations were actually funding a lot of Germany and funding us. And so it's really crazy how they peddle both sides of the coin in order to make money. And when I started learning about all of these things, I was like, well, gosh, what do you do? I mean, you learn that we're enslaved to the system. Our birth certificate enslaved us to the system without us even being aware. And when you have a valid contract, you have to, both sides of a party for a contract have to actually consent in order for a contract to be valid. Both sides of parties have to consent, and they also have to be informed of exactly what the contract entails. But when we're born, I wasn't old enough to go into a contract with the state, and my parents weren't informed that when they had done that and they got a birth certificate for me, that they actually had sold me off to the state, which is exactly why, let's just say, if the state wants to come in and take a child away from parents for whatever reason they deem necessary, they can come in and take that child. Goes all the way back to the birth certificate. That's how it gives them the power to come in and take children away from their parents. And it has to do with the birth certificate. The same thing goes with marriage licenses. I know that this is going to sound crazy, but when you have your marriage license, when you get married, on that marriage license, it also is a contract with the state. And so it says on there that anything that is that comes from that marriage goes to the state. So you actually are selling your children off to the state as well through the marriage license. I know that it's crazy. When I first read about this and learned about it, it sounds crazy, but it is absolutely true. Not only that, on your birth certificate and on your marriage license, any of those license type things, they have a bond number. When you go look at your birth certificate and you get it back, it has your name in all caps, which makes you a corporation. It turns you into a corporation and gives you a straw man. It's kind of like your twin, but it is not a real entity. I try to think of it as the Wizard of Oz. When you look at the Wizard of Oz, you have Dorothy, but you have the straw man who has no brain. He's not real. So it's a fake entity that it looks like it's you on paper, but it's not living and breathing and having a heartbeat. But on that birth certificate, it has in red letters a bond number. And so your birth certificate is actually on the stock market. And so the state actually makes money off of your birth certificate. They make money off of you from the time you're born. And they make lots of money off of you with that birth certificate. And so when you it is, but here's the problem. When we have a birth certificate and we have that straw man and that entity is taken to us, we actually cannot own anything. You don't own your vehicles. You don't own your house. You don't own anything. You actually can't own anything. The state owns your cars. You don't own your house. Even if you've paid your house off, you actually don't own your house. You actually become a tenant in that house through your mortgage. So the only way to get out of that is to take yourself back to the land and get yourself out of the maritime law jurisdiction and pull yourself back to the land and soil jurisdiction. That's the way it was supposed to be through creation. When God created man, he created man to have dominion over the whole earth. And he put us to rule the earth. He didn't put us to rule the sea. We can't live on the sea. He gave us dominion over the earth, the land. And the tricky part, I guess, is when they pulled us all into maritime international law, they took the dominion away from us. Government is actually created by man. So it should go God first, then man, then government and corporations. But the way the structure is now is it's turned on its head. You just turn that opposite, because the way it is now, government and rules over the corporations, and then then they rule over us as man. And it wasn't supposed to be that way. We, the people, are supposed to rule over the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that word government, if I remember correctly, it means control and mind. So like mind control.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what it is. Yeah. But continue.
That's right. So let's take it back to its most foundational form. So when God created man, God gave man laws. And his laws are real simple to follow. It's called common law. We're actually supposed to be under what's called common law. And those laws protect the people. The first law is you must not injure or kill anyone. And the second law is you must not steal or damage things owned by someone else. And then the third thing is you must be honest in your dealings and not swindle anyone. So basically, there's common law in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. The common law that we're supposed to be ruled by are those laws right there. Now, you can take the law or the Torah of Yah, and you can pretty much, as far as how it relates to man to man, not man to God, but man to man, you can pretty much take any of those three laws right there and line it right up with Torah.
Yeah.
And so the judges back in those times, they would sit at the gates and people would come. And if they had an issue, those judges would judge based on common law, based on God's law. And basically, if you stole something or you broke something, or you would have to repay it. I mean, It was real simple. If you killed someone, we know that they had places, cities of refuge that you could go to if you accidentally killed someone. There were things set up for common law, and common law was set up for the longest time. It was actually, it was taken away from us, if I'm not mistaken, in like 1872, right around that time, when America, the United States, actually became what's called a corporation. When the United States became a corporation in 1871, 1872, right in there, they turned everything on its head, and they did that so that we wouldn't operate under common law anymore, because common law is simple. You don't need a lawyer to if you have an issue, or if there's a problem. You just went to the gates. You just went, and a judge just figured it out for you, and you stated your matter. Now we have attorneys, and we have they've made it so complicated, and they also have what's called the UCC, which is the Universal Commercial Code. The UCC, once they made the United States into a corporation, way back then, they were able to, at that point, put all of their laws and statutes and their codes, and they were able to make things with a whole bunch of fines and fees and all of this, just thousands of laws that you just have to sift through. And in doing that, that's where we are in maritime law, because maritime law deals with corporations. It's commercial law. That is the judges that we have, the whole system that we have in our courts. None of it deals in common law. Not any of it deals in common law. It all deals on civil law, which is Roman law. And that's where you have your bar attorneys, and all of your attorneys come in. It's basically a money-making machine for them, is all it is. And even your courts are corporations. So everything that you deal with deals in a corporation. The government is, the courts are corporations, even your police stations, your local counties, everything is set up in a corporation setting. So, and even you as an individual is set up with your straw man in a corporation, so that they can fine you, fee you. Everything's done in that way so that it stays in that system. But once you break out of that system and you take control of your straw man, that fake entity, and you pull yourself back to the land, you no longer fall into their jurisdiction. You fall under common law jurisdiction, which means they can't just pull you into their courts. And that also means that they just can't. For instance, did you know that income tax is actually not lawful? It's legal.
Yeah, illegal, yeah.
I don't pay income tax anymore. It's illegal. And that's where the word citizen comes in. You learn that there's something called legalese. So they have this universal commercial code that all of the courts operate under. They operate under this universal commercial code, which doesn't apply to a man or woman like you or me. It applies to that citizen, that straw man. And from your birth certificate, when you're born here and you get the birth certificate, you become a citizen of the United States, which we should have never been citizens. If you go and look at the definition of a citizen is actually a dead entity. It's a dead entity. Or that's the lowercase citizen. And if you have the capital C citizen instead of lowercase c citizen is a dead entity, or it's cattle. The capital C citizen is someone that lives within the district of DC, Washington, DC. Well, none of us live in the district of most of us don't live in the district of Washington, DC, and fall under the federal government. So that doesn't apply to most all of us, because we aren't there. So them trying to make us pay income tax, it's only for those capital C citizens.
How
And we
would
don't
that
realize that
how would that
it's
make a
dwindled.
difference? How would that make a difference if you were living in DC? I mean, what is the the differentiation between all of that?
Okay, so here's the differentiation in all of that. Washington, D.C. is foreign soil. It actually is not part of the country. It's actually foreign soil. There's actually 3 places on Earth, and this is where it kind of gets where you find where all of this New World Order comes into play. You have 3 places on the Earth that actually do not fall into their countries. One place is London.
Right.
The spot in London that doesn't fall in, it's its own little country, and that's where that sits with the Queen. And then you have Italy, which is where the Vatican is, Vatican
Right.
City. It's its own little country,
Right.
and it doesn't fall inside of its country, and it's on. And then you have Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. actually is not part of the United States of America at all. It's actually foreign soil. It's a 10 square mile radius, I think is what it is. It's foreign soil. It's not part of our country. And it's crazy because that's where you're going to find the 3 obelisks. You're going to find at Vatican City, the obelisk. You'll see the one in London, and then you'll see the one
Yeah.
in
Rome.
in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And so here's how that works.
The Washington
Here's your
Monument.
New World Order.
Yeah.
Here's your New World Order setting right here. You have in England, in London, that's where you're going to have the Rothschilds. And that's going to be your banking cabal, okay? That's the Rothschilds. Then you have the Vatican in Italy. That's going to be your religious arm of the whole world, right?
Yes.
And that's going to be Rome. And then you have the United States. So in the United States, where Washington, D.C. is, that's the military arm.
Right,
of
the Pentagon.
This whole, that's your military arm. So your New World Order that you have set up with these 3 places is all set from those 3 locations. But not only that, the United States, when they made it a corporation, the crazy thing is we're actually not sovereign land. We're actually owned by Britain with the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
We're owned by the crown, but guess who owns the crown? The Vatican. So here you have the Pope who owns it all. And not us. He owns basically most all of the world. And it all falls under the head of that beast.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that, Mystery Babylon, and this is what I've been talking about for a long time, is that the beast kingdom and that which will be ruled over by the Antichrist, and even how the New World Order, they have the world subdivided into these 10 regions, and those are the 10 kings that give their power unto the beast in the book of Revelation. But that this Mystery Babylon, it's not a particular country. A lot of people say, oh, it's Rome or it's Jerusalem, but really it's as you said and pointed out, the banking aspect of it is London, that city, and as you also mentioned, the obelisk, and the worship of the whole theme of the phallic, the Christmas tree, all of that, which is still, even in ancient times, the lingam, these different things, the sexual organs and orientation, even the tree and the feathered serpent, all of that connects back to, even what happened in the garden and how the Cain as their progenitor was conceived of all of that, that led, even the fall, even the angels falling from grace, and you see the star that is put on top of the Christmas tree, and that is also um, a metaphor, an indicator of what happened with the angels mating with the daughters of man and conceiving their own bloodline, the race, the serpent seed, the seed of the woman, and the enmity with the seed of the serpent that has its origin in the war in heaven, but plays out in the enmity between the bloodlines, the seed lines. And so, that marriage of the star on top of the phallic symbol represents that union of heaven and earth, and the joining of the sons of God with the daughters of Cain. And so, that the obelisk and the lingam, and even you see in the St. Peter's Square, the basilica of like the lock and key. All of these are representations of the uh, vesica piscis or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is also a sexual union, a joining together. Um, and so, a lot of people aren't aware of these symbologies, but the elites, they do worship this sexual iconography, and they display it all in your face, and people don't have a realization. Even the Christmas tree is a representation of a phallic symbol, and the decoration of it, and how people have all these things in their living rooms without even having realization as to what they are participating in. It's so it's all hidden in plain sight.
Absolutely. And it even goes one step further. I mean, if you take all of this back, like you mentioned earlier, it goes back to the Babylonian. It goes all the way back to Nimrod. This is where you can take every single one of the false gods, Osiris, Baal, it doesn't matter. Name any one you want to name. It goes all the way back to Nimrod and Semiramis, his wife. And Semiramis, which would be Easter, Ishtar, you name it. She was the fertility goddess, and she's worshipped right at the time of Easter. And it has nothing to do with Yeshua. Passover is to deal with him, but when you have Easter, what they would do is they would have these orgy-like things, and the priestesses, and they would get pregnant. And then 9 months later, after they would have, and that's why we have the Easter egg and all that, is the fertility. It was all about fertility. So they would get pregnant during that time frame. And then 9 months later, you come into the Christmas time, which is Saturnalia or whatever you want to call it. It was called many different names. And those babies would be birthed. And when those babies were birthed, they were offered as sacrifices to the sun gods, because that's when the longest night of the year was, and they were looking for the rebirthing of the actual sun, and they would sacrifice those babies on the altars. That's where you get the Yuletide log. It would be a burning of that in the altar, then the fires of Moloch. And so both of those tie together. Yeah, we have no idea what we're doing with all of the so-called Christmas traditions that actually goes back into paganism and false god worship and child sacrifice.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they would even have, the sexual orgies during the times when these children were sacrificed on these brazen altars to Moloch, and screaming in pain, and being burnt alive. And they would participate. Like, how creepy, why that would be some kind of turn on, and how they could even engage in sexuality when a child's, screaming in pain and suffering. I mean, it's just, it shows you the depravity and the kind of abomination that they were involved in the celebrations. And people, wonder why it is that these things are mentioned in the scripture in the Old Testament, um, and the sacrificing, passing their children through fire, and these kind of things were said to be done by the children of Cain, and their involvement, their worship of the fallen angels, the giants were also involved in this kind of thing. It makes mention of this in great detail in the lost book of King Og, the Rephaim king, how they would, capture humans, and they would offer the children that were born of the humans, and even the males, they would sacrifice them on these altars, and only allow the women to serve as priestesses. And it's just it's all so bizarre, but yet because we don't remember the beginning, and the things that are written down in the scripture, which have lost meaning. Everything's been lost in translation and misconstrued and locked up in riddle, and people have no idea as to how the mythology of the world unites with what is revealed scripturally within the word and prophetically, because they were able to scrub so much of the ancient teachings. Like, if we didn't have the book of Enoch, I think the world would really be at a severe loss as to how to explain the whole Genesis 6, that particular narrative, and to understand the mythological nature of how the angels truly did, leaving their first estate, coming down to the earth, presenting themselves as gods. They took over not only the worship of the Most High, but then they also engaged and, took wives of all which they chose. We see in the Greek mythology, the Roman mythology, of the gods, taking wives of earthly women. And so all these things are lost and believed to be just nothing more than fairy tale. And yet there's a deep truth behind all of it. And there's true evil. The evil is organized and hidden, again, in plain sight, because everybody thinks this is just fantasy. But yet there is truth behind all that is mythological.
Well, yeah, and then you can take it a step further too. I'm pretty sure that it's in the book of Enoch as well, where it says that some of those angels that had been chained, some of them were chained for 70 generations.
Right.
And if you go 70 generations from the time of Enoch, you come into like right at the end of the 1800s to the beginning of 1900s. And that's kind of where we started getting new technologies, maybe, things that were there before. And so my question is maybe some of these entities are here. You have this whole alien agenda these days.
Yes.
And those of us who have the right understanding of biblical cosmology knows that it can't be an alien from another planet. So is it possible that these are those entities or those angels that have fallen that are now working with our governments and working with people in high? I think some of these are bloodlines. They even tell you, I mean, like some of these people in power tell you that they are of bloodlines. They keep them pure. And so there you have the bloodlines of Cain, and those bloodlines, those Nephilim bloodlines, in effect. And not only that, what has come to light over the past few years of these underground tunnels and all of these children that go missing, the child trafficking and the human trafficking, the things that were taking place back then that we were talking about, where they were offering those children, that same thing is going on today underground, and it's going on underground at the highest level, even under our own Capitol and White House.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great point, because there is a huge amount of human trafficking taking place. And as you said, the child sacrifice is organized in such a manner that what we see, as far as the Pizzagate and all of that, and I have to really be careful here because this is one of the issues that we get flagged for. And yeah, so, but for people that understand what I'm talking about, and if not, go look it up and check it out for yourself. But this is an organized evil that has been taking place and been involved as far as at the highest levels of government and state and religion. I write a lot about this in my newest books on the pre-Adamites, the antediluvian world, and how, the origins for all of this go, even before Nimrod and Babel, into even Atlantis, like the first world age, even before humanity was here, when the fallen angels were cast out. And because it says in the second book of Enoch, the book of the secrets of Enoch, and another book called the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets, that this all occurred on the second day. And I find it intriguing that we have on the second day after the earth became without form and void, which in the Hebrew is that it became a deserted wasteland and is indistinguishable ruin, that the firmament is put into place. And the firmament is this indestructible crystalline structure, and that it locked into this time-space dimensionality, the fallen angels, and that they were given this certain amount of time, 7,000 years, according to Peter, the second world age, 120 jubilees, and as you mentioned in the book of Enoch, the 70 generations, which I do believe puts us into where, the fig tree generation and where we are now, this apocalyptic age, that we are seeing since, 1947, not only with the reestablishment of Israel, the blooming of the fig tree, but as you mentioned, Roswell, the events of Roswell, and all of these UFO phenomena, USO phenomena, which is now even becoming to come into greater light with, disclosure, with the U.S. Navy having to admit witnessing and seeing craft and on radar, and whole squadrons, an entire aircraft carrier unit having to acknowledge that they were witness to and experience things that can't be explained. And so now the highest levels of government are being forced to contend with something otherworldly. And, when I say otherworldly, I don't mean from outer space, because again, the biblical cosmology nullifies all of that. And the whole propaganda of the Sumerian mythos is that they are wanting us and leading us into the concept that, yes, this phenomena, these extraterrestrials, these aliens, that they're from, other galaxies, they're from way out there, when in truth, and even the scriptures reveal that they will come out of the north, that they will be released from the bottomless pit, and that we see these crafts are entering into the oceans, into lakes, like there's a book on the Solomon Island mysteries that speaks about there's a certain lake and a certain waterfall where these craft go down into and are moving and like entering into the interior of the earth. And in my opinion, as it reveals in Isaiah chapter 13 as well, that the giants and the fallen angels, the locust army, they are all going to be released out of the bottomless pit, which is in the sides of the north. It is where this hollow earth entrance lies, where Jacob's ladder and the North Pole, that there's this great, what even Lucifer, when he wanted to exalt his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, in the sides of the north, above the mount of the congregation, God cast him down into the sides of the pit, into the interior of the earth, into Sheol, and that this is where Legion rules from. And so they're not from out there, but they've been here, and they are in the interior of the earth. There's many mythologies that speak about, these ancient cities like Agartha and Shambhala and Asgard and, different places. And it speaks about how the demigods live and rule from these places. These Naga people, which are reptilian in nature. And we see that the seraphim angels are also said to be snake-like, reptilian, dragon-like entities that, initially cast out of the heavens. They've been banned here and placed under the authority of death and taken on physical form. They, even though they were once spiritual and etheric, they have now taken on, these forms of darkness. And even the serpent, Satan, is said to be an ancient dragon, and he that deceiveth the whole world. So these things, even though they sound completely bizarre and absolutely, like if you were to talk about these things, and you were locked up in a loony bin, in a loony ward, they would certainly, start medicating you, and put you in a padded cell. But this is the truth of what's going on in the world, even though most, aren't able to grasp or even accept the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. But I don't want to diverge and divest. I do want to go back to the theme of what we're talking about. I don't want you to get off track, but yeah, this is all very important information, and I know that the listening audience really appreciates that we're able to share and even engage in conversation on this kind of level. Most people just simply wouldn't get it, but Kimberly.
Right, but and as you were saying earlier, interestingly, when you talked about all of that happening with Roswell and the creation of Israel, at that same time in the 1947-48 range, when the whole alien disclosure came and Israel became a nation, at the same time you had the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran,
Right.
where we got that Book of Enoch.
Yes.
And so
Right.
it is as if Yah is saying, okay, now's the time, because
Confirming.
right there at the beginning of Enoch, it says, this isn't written for now. This is
Yes.
written for a later generation,
Yeah, distant and remote generation. Right. And also the Nag Hammadi codices. They were found as well, and they explain the archons, who the archons are.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And going back to and tying this back into what we were discussing earlier, what's interesting is now these governments are having to disclose all of these things, but like you said, These entities have been locked in here under the firmament. They've been here just like we have, and they're coming to light and coming out of these dark places where they have been chained. Some of them have been chained. Some of them have just been here and been let loose.
Yes.
Some are being let loose now. And they are absolutely working behind our government leaders.
Absolutely.
And they're beginning to admit these things. Like, our government leaders and people in high positions are now beginning to admit these things, but they make it look as if it's some alien from another planet or a gray, when that is a lie. Those are not those entities. They're actually interdimensional beings, fallen angels that are here.
Yes.
And it's very possible that those entities could be what is pushing forward this whole new world order and making us slaves through our straw man and through building all of these things. That is a very big possibility of how they came to the knowledge of making this plan. And this whole plan to take over comes all the way back.
We're at break. All right, hold on. We'll be right back, everyone, for second hour. And we'll get further into this.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Every day,
are the stories in the Bible true?
what if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Check out swpcalendar.com to see when to join us next for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
Revolution. Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
When Alexander was king and had subdued countries and cities and had arrived in the east, he saw on the confines of the east those men who are of the children of Japhet. They were more wicked and unclean than all other dwellers in the world, filthy peoples of hideous appearance, who ate mice and the creeping things of the earth, snakes, scorpions. They never buried the bodies of their dead, but they ate as dainties the children which women aborted, and even the afterbirth. People ignorant of God and unacquainted with the power of reason, but who lived in this world without understanding, like ravening beasts. When Alexander saw their wickedness, he called God to his aid, and he gathered together and brought them and their wives and children, and made them go in and shut them up within the confines of the north. This is the gate of the world on the north, and there's no other entrance or exit from the confines of the world from the east to the north. And Alexander prayed to God with tears, and God heard his prayer and commanded two lofty mountains, which are called the children of the north. They drew nigh to one another until there remained between them about 12 cubits. Then he built in front of them a strong building, and he made for it a door of brass and anointed it within and without with oil of thesnactis, so that if they would bring iron implements near to it to force it open, they would be unable to move it. And if they wished to melt it with fire, it would quench it. And it feared neither the operations of devils or sorcerers, and was not able to be overcome by them. Now, there were 22 kingdoms in prison within the northern gate. When at the end of the world and at the final consummation, when men are eating and drinking and marrying wives and women are given to husbands, when they are planting vineyards and building buildings, and there is neither wicked man nor adversary, on account of the assured tranquility and certain peace, suddenly the gates of the north shall be opened, and the hosts of the nations that are imprisoned there shall go forth. The whole earth shall tremble before them, and men shall flee and take refuge in mountains, and in caves, and in burial places, and in the clefts of the earth, and they shall die of hunger, and there will be none to bury them by reasons of the multitude of afflictions which they will make men suffer. They will eat the flesh of men and drink the blood of animals. They will devour the creeping things of the earth and hunt for serpents and scorpions and reptiles that shoot out venom and eat them. They will eat dead dogs and cats and the abortions of women with afterbirth. They will give mothers the bodies of their children to cook, and they will eat them before them without shame. They will destroy the earth, and there will be none able to stand before them. And then after 1 week of that sore affliction, they will all be destroyed in the plain of Joppa. For thither will all these people be gathered together with their wives, their sons, and their daughters, and by the command of God of hosts, of the angels will descend and will destroy them in a single moment. That's from the book of the Bee. And it is speaking about the release of these locust armies from the center, the giants, and what are called the Siddim, the demons, the devils. And so I think definitely, this is part of the wrath of God that is poured out on the wicked and those not written into the book of life. And these things are spoken about with the angel of the bottomless pit and the smoke and the release of them at that time. And so definitely supernatural occurrences happening. And I think even now we are witness to what is the overlap of the spiritual worlds with the material worlds that we see more and more. I mean, even like on YouTube, which, I don't like to watch a lot of normal TV with, all the commercialization and all that. But you can see how there is an increase in supernatural activity, that the kids are involving themselves in the occult, playing with Ouija boards, going to graveyards to try to have communication with the dead, which we're totally warned against these kind of things. And they're opening doorways which they don't understand. But then there's all these supernatural videos, like even on TikTok, where people are showing, all these weird occurrences, this ghostly shadow people and apparitions in their houses, and knocks and doors slamming, and just all kind of weirdness. I mean, getting pulled out of their bed at night. I mean, just absolutely bizarre and unexplainable, and a lot of people, believe all this to be fake, but I definitely believe that the occult is gaining a foothold in this world, and that because there's so few people that are truly the people of God, that are grounded in faith, that understand the spiritual wickedness, the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness and the wickedness in high places that are ruling over these worlds, and that are trying to get people to invite them into their lives and open up those doorways for them to enter. That even with all the movies, Hollywood, the Charmed, even Harry Potter, these kind of things are teaching people to open themselves to those kind of circumstances, and they are totally not ready for doing that. Kimberly?
Absolutely. And not only that, when you look at the things that are being set up, as we talked about earlier, the military arm, the London arm, and then the Rome arm, they're in the process of building the new world religion. Even with the Abraham Accords that were set up last year, when they set those up, the Pope has been working on taking the Muslim faith, the Christian faith, and the Jewish faith, and making them all rolled into one, but they're putting a whole new age twist to it.
Right.
And they're even saying that, well, the new age thing, it's not religion, it's all about relationship, and it's all about meditation and calling
Right.
on whatever you call the creator. You can call on these entities, and they even go into like angel worship, and try to draw that into these faiths. And so it's actually setting up the stage for the new world religion through a new age twist. And tying it, the sad thing is what I'm seeing in the Muslim faith, the Christian faith, and in the Jewish faith, with the Kabbalah, of course, and the Jewish faith, what they do is they tie these entities and they tie New Age right into those religions. So you will actually deceive so many people from many different faiths through that new world, through the New Age movement.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They are, the mystery schools and these mystery religions and the New Age slant that is coming forth to unify everything under a one world religion, which, we have been told exactly this thing, the whole one world economic system, the quote unquote global order, that kind of thing, this deception is coming forth, and people that don't have, again, an idea of how the scriptures truly explain all of these esoteric things and the agenda of the Antichrist and the New World Order, um, they're not ready. And they buying into, like the whole ancient aliens, the teaching that these aliens are gods and that they're coming again to save us from ourselves, that they're from these other galaxies and that they are way more advanced and more knowledgeable than us, and that we should accept them as having a closer relationship to God than we do, and listen to them on, their perspective of religion and worship and faith and all of this. I mean, it is exactly what we have been told as far as the strong delusion. And, all of this has been spoken about for so very long, but it is now in our lives, in our faces, in the, in what's playing out within our children, and how now so many people also being medicated, and it seems like society is on the verge, like on a precipice of collapsing, and people simply losing it. I mean, these are, with the lockdowns and all the economic crisis, people uncertain about their work and their jobs, and now everything being mandated as far as like the snake bite and things like that. I mean, these are very weird and uncertain times for sure.
They definitely are. And what I've learned, taking it back to what I've learned about bringing yourself back to the land, common law, we know, you and I know that all of this is leading up to a point. I don't know how much time we have left here. I don't think it's much. I really think that this is all going to come to a head at some point, and Yeshua's going to step back on the scene. But you and I both know that even if you go look at Zechariah, when you go look at Zechariah, when he comes to set up his millennial reign, he is going to set it up based on his law. We will be doing his law. When a king, I guess I don't know, somehow in the Christian church age, we lost that somehow. But when a king has rule over a kingdom, he has laws that he has put in place to rule his kingdom. And God has given us his laws to put in place to rule his kingdom and rule his people. And it happens to be the Torah. That is his law.
I agree,
And it wasn't thrown out or done away with. It's still in practice today. And his festivals and his feasts that he has set up are going to be established and made the law of the earth and the law of the land. We even look at Zechariah. If you look at Zechariah, they're doing the Feast of Tabernacles. In fact, if you don't come and do the Feast of Tabernacles when he comes and rules and reigns, you're not gonna get any rain. You'll be in drought for a whole year.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And all that is being I think people are going back to it, and they're starting to get it. Even trying to understand the ancient calendars and all of that, but definitely want you to also explain further the connections to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the show with this movement back to and also want you to explain the how it was with the debt situation and how all that played out, and what became of that as well, if you could elaborate.
Okay, so when you go back and you reinstate yourself back to the land, which there's ways to do it, but when you do that, you go back to what's called common law. And for instance, the states are being reset up, all 50 states. We have people in 50 states. Like in the state of Arkansas, where I'm at, there's like 60 of us who have put ourselves back on the land. We are in the process of trying to rebuild our court system, not the court system that's on maritime law that works through the UCC code and also works through all of those statutes, but a common law court, which works through what I mentioned earlier, those 3 rules of common law. Don't murder anybody, don't kill anybody, don't steal, don't mess with anybody's stuff. Those are common law. And so if you have common law courts set up, then we can actually, as man and woman living on the land, we can actually go to our own courts with our own judges, and you have a jury among your peers. And so you would have juries set up with people who are land jurisdiction as well. You would also have sheriffs set up, marshal of arms set up. All of those offices will be set up with the correct way. Now, interestingly, when I guess I need to explain this first. When I told you there's 3 different territories, there's the land, air, and water jurisdictions. Well, we also have different jurisdictions and 3 different constitutions. Most people don't realize that the United States actually has 3 different constitutions. What was changed was 1 word in each one of those constitutions. You have a constitution for the territorial government, which territorial government falls under the crown, the England. That's where we're owned through England. It falls under the crown. Then you have municipal. You have the municipal constitution, which falls under the Vatican, falls under the Pope. And then you have our original constitution, which is us for we the people, in right standing on the land, the real constitution. And so there are all of those set up: territorial government, municipal government, and then the we the people. And when you go back and you look at debt, which is what you were asking me a second ago, I had told you that in 1933 Franklin D. Roosevelt went in and took all of the gold. And he made all of the people give up all of their gold and turn it into the federal government. And they then had to use what's called our promissory notes, which is paper currency. That was gold back for quite some time. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 1972. I could be wrong on the date, but I think it was 1972 when they decided to, it was Richard Nixon. It was Nixon was the one that got rid of gold back currency. So we no longer had gold back currency anymore, and it was on that Nixon deal. But here's what happens. This is what I didn't know, and when I was going through all of that stuff with debt, because of what had happened in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt took the gold away, the way it was set up for the debt structure to work is when you don't have a valid currency and you're using a fiat funny monopoly money, which is all our dollar bills are. It's just funny money. It's not even real. We were supposed to be a debt-based system. So how it works is we were supposed to work. Okay, so we would do our labor and do our work. But when we would go and supposedly take out a loan for a car or a loan for a house or a credit cards, all of those things, those are not, none of those things do you actually get, they don't loan you the money. your straw man. Remember how I told you about your straw man? So let's just say if I go get a credit card, if I go get a credit card and it has $5,000 worth of credit on that credit card, that credit card company didn't actually loan me any money at all. It took the credit that was already assigned to me to my name from my birth certificate. Remember how I told you earlier that your birth certificate is actually a bond and they sell it on the stock market and it makes money, and it's made a ton of money. Your birth certificate has made a lot of money. So the money that my birth certificate has made, you would think it would go to me, but it doesn't go to me because the state actually owns me. And it owns my straw man, that all caps name. And since it owns that, anytime that I would take out a loan or get credit cards, what they use is they use that credit. So the money that's in that account for my straw man, my all capital corporation name, that's how they generate those funds. And so me paying back my credit card, I'm actually paying myself back. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm trying to make that make sense because the money was never loaned. It was credit that is already due me anyway from my birth certificate. It's the same thing if you go buy a house. This is what's crazy. The mortgage company, mortgage, like mortuary, it's a death loan, the mortgage. So here's the thing. So when you go sign a mortgage, and you can go look into this, I always thought that the bank loaned you money. When you need, say you buy a house for $100,000, well, you do all the paperwork and, they give you your credit and, okay, you qualify for the house and you do all your paperwork. They give you stacks of paperwork for no reason. I don't understand why. I think it's all to confuse us. But all of those stacks of paperwork you have at closing, but when they initially gave you the, okay, let's see if we approve you for the loan. When you're approved for that loan is ready to rock and roll and go based onto your birth certificate, that credit. A bank never loans you anything for that purchase. It literally, if you go look at your paperwork, you will see that it was all upon your signature. It was your own credit that bought that house. So then the moment you sign that paperwork, you own that house as it's your straw man's. That bank never loaned you a dime. That mortgage company never owned you a dime. Yet you're going to pay interest and pay those people for the rest of your life on that note, and they never gave you a dime for it. They're making hand over fist for they're making tons of money, and they never loan you anything. All of that money is already yours based on your credit. And the way it was supposed to work in 1933 with the birth certificate was that birth certificate was supposed to be your, since you don't have valid currency, we had what's called fiat money, funny money. Our credit was supposed to pay for things for us. When we did that credit and we signed it, we weren't supposed to pay for any of that. It was supposed to have just wiped itself out. But the bankers hid that from us, and now they make a fortune for us paying back something that they never loaned us in the first place. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense, Zen?
Well, it seems like to me in the same way that the Ponzi scheme of currency works, with the Federal Reserve System printing the money and then loaning it to the governments at interest, and then they pay back all of the American people, and then all the different people that are under this kind of authority of the central banking system, they pay back on that debt. They're paying back for something that they never see. They don't even know if they ever received anything, because it's all just digits and it's all just numbers and it's all just trust in a totally fiat system, the fractional reserve lending. So to me, it's all, like a Ponzi scheme anyways. It's the way that how it speaks about Lucifer or Satan in Isaiah chapter 28 or Ezekiel chapter 28, how he gained all the wealth of the world, and how he utilizes that wealth to control the world, and all of the bloodlines that bow down to him in blood oath and that take these vows, and that they are given this power, wealth, and control. They use strategic marriage to keep up the facade of all of this control, and so it seems similar to me as that the whole Ponzi game and the Federal Reserve System.
It absolutely it is a game, and the crazy thing is they don't expect the people to wake up to it or to even
understand
it.
Right.
That's exactly right. But here's the thing. I'm hoping that more and more people will stop watching TV and stop watching the entertainment industry and really start doing your research on history, because here's the deal. If enough of us wake up and say, you know what? The mortgage company is a fraud. This is a fraud. And how many people have their houses taken away in foreclosure? They have all their houses taken away in foreclosure when they actually owned the house beforehand. Does that make sense? Like, they owned it, and then the bank takes it in foreclosure and then resells it. So I mean, they're making more money again when when you own the house on the front end. You own it the day you sign it based on your credit, which is from your birth certificate, the bond money on that birth certificate. It's a racket. It's an absolute racket.
Yeah, totally. Wanted to ask you something else that you had mentioned, and we know that the movie that Aaron Russo put out, From Freedom to Fascism, where he talked about how taxes are illegal, and basically the IRS system is like a mafioso. You were saying that you are no longer liable, or as far as the taxes, and so can you explain or elaborate on that somewhat?
Yes, absolutely. So I don't pay taxes, and not only do I not pay taxes, like as an employee, when I fill out my W-4 and all of that stuff, I'm exempt. So I'm not a U.S. citizen. See, since I'm not a U.S. citizen anymore, you can't tax me. And so I fill out my W-4 and I write exempt, and I put I'm an American state national on there. You can't tax me. And so, when all of us know when we go and we do our job, the main thing, when we get that paycheck, they take a good chunk of it, like a whole third, or take a big chunk. And so they don't take a big chunk out of me anymore. But you can't just do that. You have to change your political status on paper. You have to do the paperwork to change it. And not only did I do the paperwork to change it and get my credentials as an American state national, I actually had to write in certified letters to Anthony Blinken. Anthony Blinken is over at I had to notify him. He's Secretary of State. I had to notify the IRS by certified letter. There's two different IRSs. There's one in New York, and then there's the other one in I can't remember the state that it's in, but you have two, Washington D.C. I think, but you have two IRSs that you have to file that in. And I filed paperwork with them certified saying that I am no longer a U.S. citizen. I do not consent and will not be paying income taxes anymore. And I'm not under a tax status. And so they have me on file as not being under tax status. And so they cannot come back and take me to court. They can't take me to court because they have been notified, and they can't come after me. And there's many people that have done this now, but you can't just go off and do it. You have to do things lawfully. There's legal and there's lawful. And you have to pull yourself out of the legal system and put yourself in the lawful system so that you can absolutely be what we were created to be as sovereign citizens of the American soil.
Okay, and you were talking about at the very beginning of the TASA website. Is the information there for each one of the states for people that are interested to be able to do this? And can you go through the steps?
Yes. Okay. So yes, if you go to TASA, and TASA means the American State Assemblies. Okay. So TASA, TASA.AmericanStateNationals.org. If you go to that website, there is a lot of information. You can look up all kinds of information. Our history is there. All of the history that I was talking about from 1933, all of that history is in there. There's also something when you get there, it's called Chart Your Course. When you click on Chart Your Course, it will take you through and show you that you've got to file the 1776 paperwork. That's the paperwork that's declaring yourself back to the soil. You've got to have a copy of, you've got to have a real copy, not a copy, but a real copy of your birth certificate. They say to get 3 copies of your birth certificate. That's going to Vital Statistics. Most of the times you can go to vitalstatistics.com or vitalcheck.com and you can order 3 copies of your birth certificate. So you'll have them. That actually is that you'll need those, because if you ever have to defend yourself through something, there's your proof that you've been, that's your bond paper. That is the bond paper for your straw man, proving that they broke the law and committed fraud and built a straw man without your consent and have been making money hand over fist on your straw man, and that money should go to you as your living soul. So you need 3 copies of that, and then you'll have to do an identity paperwork. And the reason why is a birth certificate doesn't have a picture of who you are. Zen, I could have Jennifer Smith's birth certificate down the street, and I could say, this is me. You know what I mean? But there's no picture on it. So you want to make sure they'll have 2 forms of what's called a witness statement. You have to get 2 witness statements with your picture on a witness statement stating who you are, and a witness is saying, yes, I agree that this is Jennifer Smith. I've known her for 7, you got to know the person for at least 7 years or longer. And these things have to be notarized. You get them notarized, that 1776 paperwork, and that will pull you back to the land. You can also go to what's called AmericaUnincorporated.org. AmericaUnincorporated.org. As far as all 50 states go, California seems to be the state that is like, just their people are coming to the truth in so fast that they're building their state and their state government at a much faster rate than a lot of the other states are. So they have a lot of more systems put in place than me in Arkansas, or you in Georgia. So, but they have set up what's called AmericaUnincorporated.org. You go into that and you have to create a username. Just create a username and password. Once you do that, you can get into that system, and they're moving so quickly that they have it set up now that you can actually do it from that link and start doing your paperwork on your own without having to go through the American State Nationals. And that actually will record it to the recording system. Here's the deal on that. Here's another way that we've been hoodooed. For instance, we are not supposed to register anything. When you register something, you are basically utilizing someone else's
system.
property. Correct. So for instance, when I register my car, it's registered through the state and the county here, and I've got tags on it. When I do that, I'm actually just giving myself permission to drive the state's car. That makes sense? When you register anything that's registered, when you register, we're not supposed to register. We shouldn't be registering to vote. I know that sounds crazy, but a U.S. citizen registers to vote. They have to have, they're registering to do that. You don't register property taxes. You shouldn't be paying property taxes. Now that has not been fixed yet. They're still working on, I don't pay income taxes at all anymore. We're still in the process of trying to get out of property taxes. There's what's called land patents. When you have a deed, like I have a deed to my house. I haven't paid it off yet, but there's the deed and all of that stuff. I have copies of it. But when you it's registered. The state owns my house, even though I have a mortgage on it. But here's the thing. It should have never been registered. Everything is only supposed to be recorded. So I'm supposed to now record my vehicles, and I can put my own driver's license, my own license plate on it, showing that I am the one who owns that vehicle. And you shouldn't have to have a driver's license. You don't need a license for anything. Now, I am a commercial driver's license. I have a commercial driver's license because I drive school buses. I only need that commercial driver's license or that driver's license to drive my school bus because I'm actually driving for income. But to drive my car that I already own and it's mine, it doesn't need to be registered. It can have its own license plate. I don't drive, I travel because I'm not a citizen anymore. I travel. Same thing with my house. I'm learning how to do land patents. We should never register our property until I get finished learning the whole land patent process. You go all the way back to the original land patent for your property, which for me, it happens to be a guy named William Hamilton. He actually owned all this property. He had the original land patent. I have to follow the chain of custody of the deeds that go all the way back to that land patent. And then I have to publicly put that out publicly, the whole chain for it. And then once I have that land patent and all of that chain of custody for it, then I will no longer have to pay property taxes anymore because I can prove that this is my land and I have the land patent.
Awesome.
I haven't learned how to do all of that yet. I'm still in the process of learning, and there is a process to do it. But you just have to do it. No one is going to do any of this stuff for you.
Right. Well, just the fact that you are learning the process is amazing, and that there is this option of going through that. Wanted to ask you, as far as if you don't utilize the state's license and tags for your vehicle, do they harass you or look at you weird or pull you over because you don't have tags? I mean, how does that work? Because I'm sure the system. They're not, probably not aware, especially the servants of the systems, the police and fire and all that. Are you able to utilize their services? And I mean, how does that all work?
So here's the thing. I have not taken my license plate off of my vehicles yet. They're registered for me for this whole rest of this year until next year. And I left them that way because there's a guy here in Arkansas that actually makes the license plates that you put on your vehicle, and it has my American State National number actually on the plate. That's my ID number for American State Nationals. And so it would have it would have Arkansas, and then it has the plate number. It actually has the number of my vehicle. when you record, so I would record my vehicle on the LRO, which is the Land Recording Office, or the LRS. There's two different recording services in the country. One is called the LRS, the Land Recording System. The other one is called the LRO, the Land Recording Office. Those are national databases for everything that's recorded. And so when I record my vehicle on there as recorded, you can go, any cop or any police officer can actually key into that system and look up my number, and it'll show my vehicle, it'll show my land patents, it'll show my house, it'll show me, it'll show my fingerprint, my picture, it'll show all of my paperwork that I've had notarized and done to bring me back to the land, which is quite a bit of paperwork that you have to do. The 928, all of my paperwork is on there, and it is a national database. So once you do all of those things, it's on there, and they can actually look it up. And what's crazy is it even says on there, do not arrest or detain, because it says this person is not a U.S. citizen, so do not harass, arrest, or detain, because they can be fined. They can, the government and the police officers and the court system, if they try to drag you into their courts, because you're in a different jurisdiction, they can actually be fined for dragging you into their system when you're not a part of their system anymore.
Wow.
And
that's
so
crazy.
I haven't exactly done my cars yet, because there's guys that are here doing those things. I'm kind of just letting those people work those kinks out before I do it. But by the time it's time to do my car next year, I will be buying the plates that this guy here in Arkansas is making and putting them on my vehicles.
That is so cool. You should definitely videotape that whole process, and make it, like, I don't know if you guys all have like websites where you're, showing and videotaping how you're going through the process, but it's absolutely fascinating and most certainly intriguing. And the way that you say that, the servants, the police, and others of the system, that they're very much aware that there is this legal precedent for people to move themselves out of maritime law and to place themselves under a whole other jurisdiction. That is just wow. And yeah, I definitely think, especially just getting out of the paying of, the income taxes and being able to go in a lawful manner to where you can establish that for yourself. That in and of itself is a lot of money. They take a lot of money out of the wages and earnings of people, all across the country. And as you said, anybody that watches Aaron Russo's Freedom to Fascism, you'll learn very quickly that the IRS and the requirement to pay taxes, all of that was never legally ratified in the first place, and that it's a voluntary system. And so to be able to move yourself outside of that as well is, that's just absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. And I like that it's growing, because as it grows, more people are becoming aware. But I think the cops are starting to become aware. We have notices. There's notices that we give. So when I filed all my paperwork, there's also a template to certify mail or to post or to send to your county officials, your post office, your banks, your sheriff's department, any entity that is there. You send it to them, so then they have on record, and you have a certified mail ticket saying you sent it. So if the cops start messing with you, if anybody messes with you, you can say, wait a minute, I gave you guys notice. You got notice that I'm not a U.S. citizen. So if they start messing with you, once you give them notice and they don't do anything about it, then it's on them. You see what I'm saying? So like, it needs to be in a somewhere that you've given them notice that they can't treat you like a U.S. citizen.
Right, because you're now under a different status. Question from the chat room from Danielle. She says, I have a question. I have received SSI because I'm legally blind. If she were to go under this new system, would she still be able to clean self as a sovereign citizen, declare herself as a sovereign citizen, being that she receives government benefits? And how would that work? I guess, I mean, if you're going to step out of that system, you're kind of going to, have to give up your connections with that. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer on SSI. I know that if you have retirement, those that are on those that have Medicare, Medicaid, and all Medicare and Social Security, those who are receiving Social Security, those benefits, you paid into that system. Your whole life you've paid into Social Security. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So those benefits are yours anyway because you paid into it. As far as disability, I don't know the answer to that, but I can get that answer. If she wants to shoot an email to me, I can get that answer for her. I can ask. But I do know, like retirement or Social Security or any of those things, you still get all of that. That does not change that. But if she'll email me at bakerkimberly@outlook.com, bakerkimberly@outlook.com, I will get that answer and let her know about disability benefits.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Another question, as far as, you say that the TASA, they're getting set up in every state, and you are in connection with, I believe you said, like 60 other people in your state. So the states and the people that are now under this sovereignty, I guess everybody's establishing, and our websites are going up where people can gain more information to be able to do this. And I guess like TASA, that would be a great place for people to go to connect with others, and to because I think community would be very important in establishing and, people backing each other in the legal precedents, the lawful precedents of this system and the new jurisdiction. So do you see that happening? I guess with the people creating the tags and stuff, and, really learning to do even like with the property stuff, that all of this is evolving in quick manner?
It is evolving in quick manner, but remember, we're rebuilding the actual lawful government that was lost from us from the Civil War. So here's how it actually happened. The Civil War, when we had the Civil War and Lincoln was president during that time, when they disbanded, the southern states actually walked out of Congress. They just walked out and didn't come back, and they never reconvened. So we never reconvened, and we never finished that war. We've been in a wartime status since the Civil War and have never stopped that. And so we've been under this whole wrong government system since before then, 1872, when they 1871, excuse me, when they made the U.S. government a corporation, but it carried out through the Civil War. So here we are, and about 20 years ago, there was a group of people, just normal people, who were studying this stuff and started realizing these things, and like, wait a minute, we don't even have the right constitution. We don't have the government is statured wrong. They started figuring this out. So they started rebuilding the federal part, the federation part of our government. And we have that set up, and the world court part set up. Now we're building the states. And so the states are coming together, but it is we, the people, that run the government. So you don't have all of these government workers working for a paycheck. You have we the people establishing this on our free time. So it's a little slower process going, and we're learning as we go. But yes, so like in my state, we have like 60 of us, and we're trying to figure out how to do land patents. We're learning how to do those things so that we can get our property and have it as ours. We're learning how to do the car registration things, but we're also trying to learn how to set up our own courts and our own juries. So we have our courts established in this state as well. All the other states are doing the same things. Some states are working quicker than other states. But if you go to that tasa.americanstatenationals.org, when you go on there, you can click on your states and then click on your state, and there it'll show you who your state coordinator is. You can email your state coordinator, the coordinator for that state, and then in fact get in contact with someone from that state that is in that state and start working with the people that are there. Mississippi, I know Mississippi at this moment is without a state coordinator. My mom and dad live in Mississippi. They're American State Nationals, but at this moment, they're without a state coordinator. So they have quite a few people that are American State Nationals, but they are actually without a coordinator at this time. So some of their things have been put on a standstill there, but most of the states have coordinators in place. But there's people that are working to learn as we go. And so you can find all of that out from the tasa.americanstatenationals.org.
Awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to look into this more. And we'll definitely do some more shows on this, especially as things, evolve and more things come in line and come into place. But definitely, when they figure out the property tax stuff, I think a lot of people would be interested in that. But certainly I'd like to do another show where you can walk us through step by step and provide us, well, go here, do this document, fill this out, next step, go here, do this, because you say there's a lot of paperwork and the process is complex. So I think that would be greatly beneficial, and I think a lot of people would be interested in our kind of following up with this show, and that we laid, really great groundwork for explaining this. And I'm really amazed at how far along, all of this is, and really being able to move yourself out of this whole maritime legality and everything. So kudos to you and to all the other United States nationalists for doing what you do and for having brought it this far. Very well impressed. And, I think this is something that everybody needs to know about. And so thank you, Kimberly. Again, if you would give out your website, social media, anything that you'd like to just share.
Okay, so as far as doing your paperwork and coming onto the land, California seems to be doing the best and has more stuff in place. They have put a website there called AmericaUnincorporated.org. If you will go to AmericaUnincorporated.org, you can create a login, create an account, doesn't cost anything, and that will help you do the paperwork process right straight through there. And
Sweet.
You can actually record it onto that national LRS or LRO system that I told you about. It's AmericaUnincorporated.org. That's where you can go to do the paperwork through them. Another place that you can go for the national, so this is national, is TASA, TASA.AmericanStateNationals.org. Click on chart your course. You can just play on that website for a while and learn a whole lot. But chart your course is where the 928 paperwork is to do if you go that route. to get a lot of information as far as courts and maritime law and all of that, sovereigntyinternational.fyi. sovereigntyinternational.fyi. That is just a portal of all kinds of good information. And if you need me for anything, I'm at bakerkimberly@outlook.com.
Awesome. Thank you, sister, for making yourself available. And thanks, everybody, for listening in. Be blessed and hope you enjoyed the show. Good night, all. Shalom.
Thanks, Zen.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Kimberly. Be blessed, sister.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.